I want to introduce to you my two new friends, Mariah Prince on the bottom in my screen with the big glasses on, and Samantha Wyland with the smaller glasses. We all have glasses, and I can't, so I can't describe that. Mariah is a nurse practitioner who works primarily with women on their menopause journey to help them get through it. She does prescribe some hormones. But like me, she believes that hormones are not the first resort. She believes in holistic work. Samantha is a health coach, I believe it would be the best way to describe you. And she works primarily with gut health. And today we're here, and I'm Jean Andrus, the menopause guru. And we're here today to talk about menopause in the workplace. And as I've said, excuse me, as I've said earlier, while you are going through menopause, working becomes especially difficult because we just don't plan for it. We don't understand it. HR thinks we should be just the same as we always are. And I'm going to let either Samantha or Mariah take over while I turn off my audio and cough a bit.
Okay, so I don't mind taking over. My name is Mariah Prince Allen. As Jane said, I am a nurse practitioner. I'm also the founder of Telehealth for Her, which is a virtual women's practice. So I help women leaders, executives, and entrepreneurs navigate the perimenopausal journey. And as you can tell, I have a lot of experience working with them as they're also in the workplace and how their symptoms actually cause a decrease in their work productivity. So as we know, I think it's a well known statistic that America loses $1.8 billion a year just due to the decrease in work productivity of women as they're going through the perimenopause journey, just because of loss of, taking more time off, decreasing their hours, or leaving the workforce altogether just due to very bothersome symptoms. So I think because of that, the North American Menopause Society, they had launched what they're calling Making Menopause Work, which is a lot of guidelines for employers, employees, and how to help and support women throughout this natural transition of their lives.
Okay, and here's Samantha Wyland. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do and how you got into this.
Sure. So my passion is helping people whose careers, family time, and social interactions are limited due to their fear and their shame around their chronic digestive disorders, which also incorporates hormonal fluxes, skin changes, various things that often come about because of perimenopause. And that is my story. I was able to do my own research and then educate my doctors about the root cause of my condition, which ended up being primarily hormonal, emotional, psychological. And then we were able to treat the root cause rather than just kind of the trial and error that I was going through for years, which was so torturous. So now I use that same knowledge to walk my clients down a path to freedom and a better quality of life, confident they have the support of someone who's been in their shoes. I'm also the founder of Your Best Life, an online coaching program. So you can always check me out, Your Best Life by Samantha.com.
Great. So let me start with a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about my own experience and then what I think some of the big challenges are. And if either of you want to add anything to this, just sort of shoot your hand up and I'll let it break in. So when I was 48, my perimenopause journey started. And for me, the symptoms were not the symptoms you think about. They weren't those quick mood swings. They weren't hot flashes. They weren't even wonky periods. Remember that wonky is a technical term. But I was more regular than ever within my periods at that time, probably because of the hormonal changes in my brain that were driving my periods. But one of the big symptoms for me was anger and basically the inability to suffer fools gladly. And I could not deal with people who weren't capable of doing their jobs. Because they just didn't have the skill level or the knowledge level to do them. And I worked in IT. So I worked with a couple of guys who are older. They had been trained way, way, way long before. We were making a big transition to a new system and they couldn't handle it. And the problem was that in order to get my job done, they needed to be able to do theirs. And I flipped out one day. I just plain flipped out. And I wound up leaving that job on very bad terms. I trashed my office on my way out because I was angry. And I was tired of dealing with, people pleasing. So people pleasing ends basically as we started to perimenopause. And it's because of the way our brains work. And our brains, when they start getting less estrogen, do not do people pleasing anymore. It's probably the first symptom that women notice. They don't tie it to menopause because usually their periods are still going on. But right around the age of 43, we stop being people pleasers. Well, I was well past that. I was not going to be a people pleaser. I wound up out of a job. So when I talk about the symptoms that interfere with us working, it's not just hot flashes. It's not going into a meeting, having a hot flash, starting to sweat, turning red in the meeting. It's not just, you never know when your period's going to show up. It's not just these mood swings. It can be these underlying, and it's not just the change in the way we think. So we can't work the same way. So those are all things I work with my clients on, changing the way that we are relating to the world, the way we're relating to our minds, the way our minds work, and supporting both by using holistic means to increase our ability to have as healthy a level of estrogen and progesterone as we can, but also to understand how those changes are really permanent changes. It changes the way we think permanently. And so we need different strategies to cope. So that's how I work with women who are in the workplace or running their own business. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and changing the way they take on their daily lives in order that they can be the most productive they can be and the happiest they can be, because that's super important. So go ahead, Samantha.
I was just kind of waiting for you to get to the end of your
Take a breath.
sentence. So our stories kind of are perfect together because mine is completely the opposite. So you started out, I guess, knowing that you were going through menopause, or
No, I did not.
you had no idea? Okay.
Obviously, I absolutely just thought I was going crazy.
Yeah, well, right there with you. Of course, my symptoms started with digestive issues. So, of course, we started treating the digestive issues. Then I started to have hives and rashes, and it seemed like I was having an allergic reaction to everything. And my my cycle was 31 days. It just never, by the time it was almost done, it started again. And that was not me. I was 4 days, phase it out, one and done since the first day I got my period. So that was incredibly odd. And the fact that I was hemorrhaging so heavily and not being able to hold out solid food, obviously I became very, very sick. Now I was 37, 38 maybe. So menopause did not cross my mind. My doctor she said to me, Samantha, you're going through some changes. Your body doesn't like you very much right now. And I was like, that's not at all helpful. But she wasn't wrong. She wasn't wrong. So now, of course, I'm Googling and I'm thinking, why does my body hate me? Why do I have so much saliva? Why do I have bumps on my tongue? Why am I itching everywhere? everything. So now think I'm ready for a rubber room because, as soon as you Google something, until you really learn how to do that, oh, I'm dying. Of course, we're all dying when we Google our symptoms. So my doctor said, okay, let's just run. So we went through medication, which of course all have their side effects. So, I worked in sales. So, and I worked from home, luckily. So whatever bathroom issues were happening, I didn't have to do in public. It was mostly just in my basement. But when I was not on the phone, I wasn't making money. So killed my paycheck. My commission started dropping. Yes, I was having mood swings, but I've always sort of been kind of an anxious person, so it was not unusual for me to fly off the handle on occasion, in a controlled environment. So at some point I said, my doctor said, I think we're missing something. And I had been seeing this guy once a week for 2 years. He was so tired of seeing my face. He's like, let's just make sure we're not missing. I really feel like we're missing something. Let's find out. So had the test done. I wake up on the table and he says to me, okay, Mrs. Wyland, everything looks great. I'll see you back in my office in 4 weeks. That's when I fell apart. Completely fell apart. Because I'm like, I need to know what's wrong with me. Someone needs to say, hey, you have this, take this pill and you're going to get better. And that didn't happen. And I went down a deep, 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 dark hole for quite a while. So I'm going to shut up now and let someone else talk.
I just want to bring up one point that you said and emphasize it, because I talk about this a lot. You went to doctor after doctor. Obviously, some of them were specialists. It sounds like you had a primary care who was following along. And not one of them said the word to you. Not one of them said perimenopause. This is possibly hormonally driven to hormonally changing. And this is true for all of us. I went to my gynecologist. She literally did the test and did not say the word. So I was still in this, I'm changing, something's wrong with me. She says I'm still fertile. She didn't say the word perimenopause. She didn't say, hey, do you know about this? Do you have an idea of what's going on in your body? So this was a good gynecologist. I loved her. I moved away. That's why I don't go see her anymore. But I loved working with her and she was really good. But she didn't jump to the conclusion or even decide to be proactive and say, do you know what perimenopause is all about? And I think this is part of what you're seeing. Now that's a gynecologist.
Yeah.
A general practitioner or primary care is one step down about knowing all this stuff. And all those other specialists you saw, they don't have a clue.
Yeah.
So
I think I chime in too here.
I want to talk to Mariah actually about this, because I think there are people coming along who are better suited to this, but we get used to seeing the same practitioner and we assume that they understand. So Mariah, talk to us a little bit about the healthcare system.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is just lack of knowledge. Even when like I talk to OBGYNs a lot, their medical education is not on perimenopause, menopause. Like they may have had that as a lecture in their years of education, right? So that's just not where they're learning. That's not where the medical education is focusing time on. So it's really not their fault. They just don't know. They don't know. And I think a lot of times too is because like when we think of women's health, we think of reproductive rights and birthing kids and, pap smears every year and, make sure you don't have any gynecological actual issues. But we don't actually think about the woman who is past her or ending her reproductive times and what actually does that mean for her health. And I think now we're starting to while menopause is having a moment, we're starting to a little bit learn and educate and have like these actual conversations. But I just think that, even for me, like, I have a bachelor's, a master's, and a doctorate degree in nursing. And I'm a family nurse practitioner. I learned how to take care of people from womb to tomb. And I do not recall learning about perimenopause or menopause in my journey. And I even had a women's health rotation. So that was all on literally what's like, what gestational age is she? What's the fundal height? Like, it was all of that stuff, but it wasn't on perimenopause or menopause. I had to teach myself. I had to find experts who actually knew women's hormones to be able to learn it and to be able to help this field. But I think that's another reason why too, there are some of the medical healthcare providers that are saying, like, for me, I'm like, okay, I want to help that forgotten woman, the woman who we have seemed to have forgotten about in the medical books, in the research studies, right? Like, we just didn't know those things. And I think too, it says a lot because it's not even just for women who are like us on this call. Like, Oprah was very vocal about her perimenopause journey. She has billions of dollars, and it took 5 doctors for them to realize that her heart palpitations was not actually a cardiac issue. It was the fact that she was in perimenopause. So I like to tell people, if it took Oprah 5 doctors, I guess for every 0 in my bank account that I do not have of hers means that that's something I'm gonna have to see before they realize that I'm in perimenopause, right? So I think too, and I think it's enough so too, like, I have not reached that stage in my life yet, but I know now what to look for. I know now what to educate my friends about. I know now what to educate like my older sister about, right? Like, because I can now say, like, I know what this is, and we can put a name to it. And I think a lot of times too, the symptoms that women do get diagnosed with, like they are having, especially those who are having like irritability, depression, the fatigue, a lot of times they're getting put on antidepressants and they really aren't depressed. It's more so just the hormone imbalances that they're having. That's
right. And if they learn how to rebalance their hormones naturally so that they are getting the serotonin they need, not from a pill, which has side effects, which is addictive, which is actually dangerous to go off of in terms of the addictability, or they know how to manage their dopamine so that they know how to give themselves a little dopamine hit during the day. And some of these things are part of how I work with my clients. You're working a little differently with yours, but it's all the same thing. It's these symptoms are the results often of the way we've lived our lives to this point. I can tell you I was not particularly healthy coming into this. I was already diagnosed with high blood pressure and high cholesterol at the age of 48. And I know that for me, going into it, had I known and had I been proactive about finding the ways to um, support my body holistically, I would have never been on those pills in the first place. I would be on them now because I have hereditary heart issues. But the ideas that we're going through this and have number one, no knowledge, and number two, no support.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I think that all of us are saying is understand that this happens sooner than you think.
Yeah. And I
For
was going to
Samantha,
example with Samantha, like, I tell clients all the time, like, if you're 30, 35, we should be having this conversation. Because I'm sure, like, Samantha's doctor's like, you're way too young for that. And that's not the case.
yeah. And yes, you were young going through it, Samantha. I give you that. For most of, I was late going through it. But my first symptom appeared at the age of 43, and it was a change in in seasonal allergies. I'd never had seasonal allergies before. And I was driving through Vermont with, I don't know, those of you who live in the Northeast may remember this phenomena, but in the spring, there's a couple of days where it rains green. It's not wet rain, it's literally pine pollen falling through the air. And I started sneezing. I was driving on I-91 up through Vermont north, and I couldn't stop sneezing. If you've ever sneezed like that, you know that this is not a good way to drive because you're literally banging your head into the steering wheel. So I pulled off and I stopped at a little gas station, and all they had for Benadryl were those little packets that hang on the rack by the cash register. At the time, it was, um, and I bought 2 of them, and I swear they cost $9 or something ridiculous like that. They really hit you for it. And I had to literally sit in my car with the until those Benadryl took over. And nobody ever said to me, seasonal changes in the way your body responds to hystemic incidents happens. This is a symptom. And people just don't talk about what these symptoms are. And I want to bring that up because I do have a list of over 100 symptoms. The famous website is 34 symptoms. It's not nearly enough to talk about everything that changes.
Yeah.
Not nearly enough. So menopause.guru/symptoms. You can sign up and get a download of my chapter from my book that is just listing all the symptoms. So how does it affect us in the workplace? Samantha, you said that you weren't you were working as a commissioned salesperson at the time?
Yes, I was hourly plus commission. So obviously
Okay.
the more, portraits that I, scheduled, the more money I made, the more phone calls I made, the more money I made. And you know, it was really hard. I remember my husband started a new job and he was traveling, and I was putting my son to bed. I mean, he was, let's see, so when I started, he was like, it came on gradually. Even though I was very, very young, it did come on sort of gradually. So I was, let's say I was 38, which would have made him 8. So, mommy still puts you to bed. So, and he was giving me a hard time, and I'm literally crawling across his bedroom to get to the bathroom because the pain, the cramping in my stomach was so terrible.
Mm.
So, I mean, that was bad. So I couldn't even be there for my family, which was, torturous, and I would try to hold myself together to make enough phone calls to make enough money that we needed to support my family. But,
And pay for all those doctor visits.
and to pay for all those doctor bills and make sure we kept our insurance. But I love kind of how you were talking about, the changes that happen in your body that you don't necessarily associate with menopause.
Mhm.
From what I went through, for me, like how my doctor said your body doesn't like you right now, for me it was like I had an autoimmune disorder. Because let's say, I used to take a probiotic every day, and then I stopped it for a while or whatever for whatever reason because I was playing with things, and then I took it again, and then I broke out in hives. And I'm like, oh my gosh, now I'm allergic to this probiotic. No, I really wasn't. My body was just attacking anything new or different that I put into my body. And the very
Yeah.
last medication that my doctor put me on for my stomach was the last medication that I ever took because I felt so high and cracked out. I don't even know if we're allowed to say that. Like I
Yeah.
literally wanted to jump out a window. So I called out of work that night. I said, I'm really feeling terrible. I didn't tell them why. I can't work. I really can't work. And I just sat there and like freaked out for like 5 or 6 hours. Talked to my doctor the next day, and he was like, okay, let's try this. I'm like, no, 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 we're not trying anything else. I'm done. I'm done trying. That's it.
Yeah. I want to piggyback on something that you said about your body doesn't like you anymore and autoimmune disorders. So autoimmune disorders often develop during this time, including something that's not an autoimmune disorder, something that's genetic. I've met women who've had celiac. The your body can't process gluten, and they have the gene for it, but it's never triggered in them until they hit perimenopause or sometime along their menopause journey, because what's happening is their body, estrogen and progesterone, let's talk just a little bit about those two guys or girls. Their job is to make it easier for you to survive. And I'm going to be politically, like right now, politically, this is not something I want to be saying, but making it easier for you to have babies and raise them and stay alive for them. Doesn't care whether you're particularly healthy, but it wants you to stay alive for your babies. And this goes back 50,000 years and is not necessarily what we need anymore, but it's still the same way it works. Estrogen and progesterone broaden the range of healthy, or not, let's say not sick, things that your body will accept. And then as it narrows, it also narrows the range of being healthy. And what you found specifically was your gut just blew up. Now, there's all kinds of stuff that could have triggered that, but because your hormones were no longer at the old levels, your body said, "Oh, we're not going to put up with this." So your body did hate you. Yeah, I can very much see that. Mariah, you want to chime in on this? I
Yeah,
can see you.
yeah, I was gonna say too, like there's changes. So what we're learning now in the perimenopause space is that there are changes that happen to a woman as she's going through perimenopause that actually happens in the gut. So the gut microbiome becomes more like similar to the gut microbiome of a man when women are going through perimenopause. So they are losing a lot of their good like good bacteria, for example, like Akkermansia, which is a natural GLP-1 inhibitor. We have studied and learned that like that is a lot less in the gut of women. So you want to talk about like getting that abdominal weight gain, everybody's on their GLP-1 inhibitors. That's something right there that we just naturally know that that's one of the major organisms that is missing and that gets depleted in the gut microbiome. That's also too why a lot of women start to develop food sensitivities, because the things that people say all the time, the things that I could eat when I was younger, I can't eat those anymore. But that's because of the changes in your gut microbiome, which is making your gut a little bit more sensitive to things, and it's all related to an increase of inflammation in the body. We know that, for example, because the American Heart Association back in 2020 said that menopause is one of the most higher times where a woman is at increased risk of cardiovascular disease because of the increase of inflammation that happens in our bodies. So that is why we get, the gut issues. That's why we get the cardiovascular issues. That's why we get the brain fog issues. It's all related to just that increase of inflammation. So yes, your body does not like you. You don't feel because of that literally biological things that are happening to us to be able to explain it. And I think that's too well, like, for example, in my practice, like I don't just say, okay, well, these are your symptoms. Here's what I'm going to do about those. Because a lot of it has to figure out like what truly is the root cause of this woman's symptoms. Like, is she actually having changes in her gut microbiome that's causing all of these issues? Because we do know that the gut plays a humongous role factor in our overall immune health. And there's a gut-brain axis, all of these things. So you have to really be strategic in how you actually approach women, and not just saying like, okay, here is your hormones, because if you put hormones in a body that's already inflamed, you're not helping them at all. You got
Exactly.
ways to decrease the inflammation first.
Yeah, so much there. I think the big thing that we're all saying is we need to support our specific issues, and each of us works a little differently to do that. You probably work more from tests. I work from symptoms. So there's a little more with what I do. There's a little more trial and error. Is it cortisol, or is it gut issues, or is it something else? But in each case, what we're saying is this is a unique process for every woman. And it depends on your genetic history. It depends on your reproductive history. It depends on your lifestyle. It depends on your weight, and I, I've gone very carefully into the weight loss space because I don't like the idea of body shaming people. I mean, Samantha is a person who probably, because of the issues, went too far. You probably lost more weight than you would have liked to lose. And
Way,
there's
way more.
and there are people.
I was at the very, very, very unhealthy weight, even for a
Yeah,
woman as petite as I am.
yeah. So we want to emphasize that it's about health. It's not about whether or not you can fit into a size 2 or a size 0. I will never do that. Um, I could I could diet for the rest of my life and still not fit into a size 2. Just isn't going to happen. So what we want to emphasize is that where you the the steps you take are dependent on the symptoms and the underlying cause of those symptoms in your body. So you're in perimenopause or menopause, and you have to deal on a daily basis with this workplace. What are some tips that you can give, Mariah, to a person who's going into a workplace? Maybe they're what would you say to them as they are going into this workplace to deal with these menopausal symptoms?
Yeah, I think the first thing is acknowledging what her symptoms are and letting this woman know that her symptoms are validated. Because I think that's where you start. Because again, like both of you have said, you've been to multiple doctors and nobody has quite figured it out. And so that's the story just about of every perimenopausal woman. So they already feel like there's no hope for me. And now I just got to deal with this. But I think it's also reminding them that they are worth advocating for and that they and empowering them to advocate for the needs that they need in their job so that they can keep their work so they can keep their job and I think a lot of it is just having a true honest conversation with whoever their employer is to say like, hi, I am dealing with X, Y, and Z. My doctors have not figured out why I'm dealing with X, Y, and Z just yet. But these are some of the things that I'm going to need, right? Like, is it possible that, I work from home? Is it possible for me to spend less days in the workforce? Is it possible to turn down the air so that when I have to go sit in a board meeting, I'm not so concerned that I'm going to break out in a hot flash? Like, right? Like, is it possible to do just these little things? Like, if you work at a place, you guys have uniforms. Like, can we work on getting like more ventilated uniforms? Like, and all of those tips is actually in. And I think too, we should make sure that these resources get put into the comments, but they all are in the consensus recommendations for the North American Menopause Society that they just released this year. That they've been working on. So things to help employers, things to help employees, like how to start these conversations, all of that is in there. But I think the biggest thing is just empowering women to know that one, you do not have to suffer through this alone. There is help for you. Somebody eventually will help you. Or you'll figure it out, or you'll get sick and tired of being sick and tired and you'll invest in your health. But in the meantime, I think you just have to have an honest conversation with your employer and feel empowered to advocate for yourself because no one's going to advocate on your behalf.
I want to add something to that. Um, so we've learned over the last when I was growing up, there was no such thing as the Americans with Disabilities Act. There was no accommodation in the workplace for a health condition. If you had a health condition that was interfering with your work, you had two choices: deal with it or quit. That's not true anymore. You're still going to run into guys who have no clue what this is. And if they're your managers, they're your bosses, they're the owner of the company, you may still have those two choices: deal with it or quit, because there may not be any way out. However, the more that women go into their HR departments, hopefully you have one, or a person who is sympathetic at the job place, and explain to them that this is not you just being picky or wimpy or whatever, that this is truly a health condition. And legally, your employer has to give you those accommodations if if the problem can be solved by accommodations. You know, as you said, the turning the air down in a meeting room so that it's not overwhelmingly hot. Making sure you can take breaks, making sure that you can have a cold drink at your workstation so that you can grab that cold drink, ice cold drink if you're having a hot flash. One of the three best methods I know of to deal with a hot flash. First, breathing. Once you start controlling your breathing, you'll start controlling your hot flash. Second, something cold to drink. And the third, so I don't have one right here, but there are little tiny gel packs that you can buy 2x3. You need to buy them online because I've never found them in the drugstores. They're cold packs. Stick them in the freezer, stick them in an insulated lunch bag, put them right here when you're having a hot flash, right on the inside of your wrist. That's the place where there are big blood vessels running very close to the surface. If you cool down that space, it's going to stop that hot flash really quick. It's great overnight. You can keep the lunch bag by your bed. It's great at work if you can keep that lunch bag right by your workstation. It's very quick. It's very easy. But the point is, employers need to understand that this is a medical condition. And if they're not making accommodations, they are in violation of law. I know we're going to have to push this. Somebody's going to have the lawsuit. Not going to be me because I don't work for anybody but myself anymore. And I fire myself on a daily basis. So. But yes, we need to be able to say to our employers, we need these accommodations, and it is part of the law. You have to make these accommodations for it. Like I said, someone's going to have to be the person to be the test case.
And I think
Samantha, oh, go ahead.
it's more than just like the hot flashes, right? So like,
oh, absolutely.
think of menopause is what we think of, but I think for the women that are really struggling with the fatigue side of menopause or the brain fog, that's where they're really losing their work productivity. So I think too, that's where, you know, truly getting the help, like the medical help to actually fix your symptoms, I think is the best way to get about it. But I think too, again, just having those honest conversations with yourself. If you're realizing that you can't remember things, like, you know, writing things down, you know, preparing for your speeches before you have to have a board meeting, like giving yourself tip sheets and, you know, getting a planner, writing, having a to-do list, setting alarms, you know, things of that nature, just to kind of help with some of that brain fog and that fatigue, like really being intentional about preparing for the meetings or preparing for the work calls and things of that nature, just because you know that there's times where you may not remember the words that were just coming out of your mouth, and having to
Really?
and having to recoup from that. But I think another thing too in the space of womanhood is that sometimes we get a little bit of shame too, you know, like, oh my God, I can't remember my words, like, you know, and that comes with a lot of embarrassment. But I think in all honesty, we put so much pressure on ourselves that other people are not putting on us. You know, like we have this self-pressurized system. And I think a lot of times too, we just take a break, take a moment, and just really make sure that when you're not at work, that you are doing things to like recenter yourself, recenter your mind, doing some self-care things, and not just always constantly on the go, because you're not giving your brain time to adequately rest in a time where it's already being, you know, stressed to the limits due to all the inflammation going on with perimenopause.
Okay, so I'm going to riff off of that, and then we're going to ask Samantha her best tricks. So start thinking about them. So one of the things that you're talking about is the stress level. And I talk about, in my work, I talk about the CPE axis, which is the cortisol, progesterone, estrogen axis. And all three of these after menopause, so I work with a lot of postmenopausal women as well, are made in the adrenal glands, and they're all made from the same precursor, progesterone. You don't need to remember that, but just remember that they're all working with the same raw material. Cortisol is the most important of those hormones, and it will be made whether or not you have enough estrogen or progesterone. It will simply make enough cortisol, and cortisol is what's dealing with stress. So when you are stressed, you're getting even less estrogen and progesterone. So what you're talking about in terms of de-stressing and learning techniques to manage your stress, we really can't reduce stress for the most part. We can reduce how we react to it, but you can't get rid of your husband as much as you want to. You can't get rid of your kids. It'll happen sooner or later, but if you've got young children in the home, you've got to deal with them. You don't want necessarily to get rid of your job, especially if you're on an executive kind of track. You want to be able to continue to do that. You can't get rid of the car that breaks down. Yes, you can, but it's costly. What you can do is manage all that stress, learn the ways to bring it down. And that's one of the things that I teach through hypnosis and a process called neuro-linguistic programming and Reiki and a bunch of other things. I do a lot of work with stress management because that's the biggest thing that you can do to change the way your body is reacting, is to allow those adrenal glands to make the thing that you need, progesterone and estrogen. Samantha, best tricks, best ideas for coping with workplace.
Okay, so I do want to say one thing because you were talking about cortisol. I want to talk a little bit about serotonin, because serotonin is produced in your gut. And when your microbiome is out of balance, you're not able to make the right amount of serotonin. And serotonin is kind of what is like your chill out hormone. They call it, rest and digest. So when your other hormones are out of balance and when your hormones are not cycling through your brain at the proper points, like our
Levels and
body is
points. Yeah.
designed to produce certain hormones at certain times. Like you put your hand on the oven and it's hot and you pull it away. That's your estrogen or whatever, your testosterone kicking in to tell you to pull your hand away. When you're exercising, you produce more serotonin because it kind of helps to chill you out. You get that runner's high. When you're in a hormonal flux like that, you're not producing, the serotonin is not being properly regulated through your brain. You're not making enough in your stomach and it's not regulating enough through your brain. And that has from my opinion, has a huge impact on, sleep, panic attacks, stress, all of those things. So I'm a big proponent of serotonin, and that's just one of my personal favorites. In the workplace, I feel like not only for perimenopausal, menopausal women, I feel that employers need to be more proactive for their employees. I feel like they need to have, health workshops, don't have a vending machine, in the building, educate your workers about how to stay healthy, more proactive in preventing problems and diseases. Obviously, you can't prevent perimenopause, but eating healthy and learning a little bit, from a medical professional or having a health work day workshop, can provide a lot of information, and people can go, aha, the light bulb kind of goes off, rather than like knocking on your boss's door and being like, I got this thing, that I can see how that would be a little bit uncomfortable. But definitely keep a journal. Write down what you ate, how you felt, what everything was like in your body, and anything unusual that happened that day, and just write it down and do it for a month or two, and then see if you can find a pattern. And for me, that's what helped me find the pattern. Everything that was happening with me was happening in a perfect cycle that never ended, but it was a perfect cycle. Everything happened in the exact same order every single month for 2 or 3 months. And that was when I thought, now I think I know what it is. And I was the one that figured out that it was, hormonal fluxes, perimenopause. So, make those adjustments for yourself. Bring a healthy lunch to work. Dress in layers. Like I said, get the ice water and do those kinds of things. And if you're not the type of person that wants to do that, not everybody wants to, give up their potato chips and, eat kale and, blend smoothies and, things like that. There are medications that can help you. I'm very much a balance of science and nature. And I think that's where Mariah and I we all kind of are aligned, but,
Yeah.
because I was at the point, like I said, I was 65 pounds. So there was not time for me to, yes, I was going to therapy, but there was not time for me to kind of change my diet, my lifestyle, my stress, because by that, it would have been too late for me, I feel like. So I needed to address my hormonal fluxes immediately, and it made a very big difference. And then I was able to introduce more of a healthy diet and lifestyle because I wasn't freaking out all the time and I wasn't laying on the bathroom floor anymore. So you make better choices that way. And then
Absolutely.
at one point I went back to my doctor and he said, wow, you're really doing so much better. It was my gastroenterologist. It was my lifesaver, and he listened to me all the time, everything I said. And I said, oh, I'm still having these terrible, terrible cramping. I just can't, the pain is so bad, I can't even move. And he said, Samantha, you need to get control of your hormones. And he prescribed me some Vicodin for the pain, which I never took. Went ahead and got a hold of my hormones in the way I felt most comfortable. Not for everyone, I'm not an advocate, but that was the right thing for me to do. And a few months later, I was, better than I was even before I started menopause, because I probably had imbalances my whole entire life. So, just
Okay, so let's just wrap this up a little bit. Samantha, how can people reach out to you, especially around gut issues or all of those digestive tract uncomfortablenesses that some of us get during this time of our lives? That's your specialty. Where can people find you?
Sure, you can go to my website. It's yourbestlife.samantha.com.
Great. And Mariah, how can people find you?
My website is www.telehealthforher.com. The four is spelled out. And then also on Instagram and Facebook, Telehealth for Her. I'm also on LinkedIn as Dr. Mariah Prince Allen.
Awesome. Awesome. And you can find me at menopause.guru. And the really big thing that we are saying here today is reach out, learn what you need to learn, understand how it works in your body, and get the help you need. There are people out here. I do sort of a generalized health coach, menopause, what I call menopause mastery coaching. Mariah's a nurse practitioner who can even go as far as prescribing hormones if you need them. Samantha is an expert in gut health, and we are not the only ones out here. Remember that your sisters are going through this too. Every woman who lives long enough will go through this. You're not alone. Ask the questions. If your friends don't know, come see us. We've got the answers. And if we don't have the answers, we know where to find them. For those of you who are still in the workplace, it's not easy. That's all I can say. It's not easy, but there is help for you. For those of you who are entrepreneurs, remember that this is going to affect you as well. How you go about your day is going to change as you go through menopause. And for those of you who are wondering whether or not this is menopause, reach out. That's basically what I have to say. Thank you so much for joining me, Samantha and Mariah. It's been a lovely conversation, and I hope this has been helpful for you out there as well. All right, now. Okay. I am working on getting us to go away, people. Working on it, working on it. I don't know what I can do here. I'm going to end the Zoom meeting, and then I'm going to invite Samantha and Mariah to come back and we'll recap.